What's up, guys? My name is Drew Heisler and I'm here to give you a speed training workout you can perform in your own front or backyard. Today we're going to go over a dynamic warm-up, a series of sprint mechanic drills followed by an actual sprint workout. Before we get into that, there's three things that we want to touch on. The first is the purpose of a speed training workout is to increase your speed running from point A to point B. And ideally, every sprint you perform today would be at or close to your maximum sprinting speed. In order to maintain that, it's important that you allow yourself proper rest in between each sprint. Ideally, we want to have between 60 and 90 seconds of rest between each sprint, regardless of how fatigued you may or may not feel. The purpose of a speed training workout is to increase your outputs, not to make yourself tired and not to give yourself a cardiovascular training effect. We want speed, we want power, we want to increase your outputs. Another thing that we want to think about when it comes to sprinting speed are the actual mechanics of sprinting, and two things that are of particular importance. The first one is of knee drive. On every sprinting stride, we want to really focus, we want to really emphasize a big knee drive where you're moving towards the end range of your hip flexion capabilities. So on every sprint, we really want to focus on driving the lead leg up, as high up as you can get it, not forward, but up. So on every sprint, we want to try to get that knee to about hip height or slightly higher. This is going to allow your hips, your legs, your glutes, all the muscles that you have in your legs, enough time to really fire back into the ground, propelling you forward. A second thing that we want to think about is the actual where your feet contact the ground on each sprint. So as you're going through these sprints, we want to focus on driving back into the ground. We don't want to focus on driving straight down into the ground. We want to focus on driving back into the ground. Again, the idea of a sprint is to propel you forward, at least through the first 15 to 30 yards. Right? So every stride you take, we want to focus on getting a good, powerful knee drive up to load the hip, and then we want to strike back into the ground at a good angle to drive you forward. Right? So knee drive up, hammer back on every stride. Getting into the warm-up. Ideally, we want to get the heart rate up, we want to get a little bit of a sweat going, so it's a good idea to go for a 5-minute slow jog to kind of get yourself sweating and get your body flowing a little bit. I've already done that because I figured you guys didn't want to watch me jogging back and forth up and down my sidewalk. After we hit a 5-minute jog, the next thing we want to perform is just a series of mobility drills just to make sure that your hips are loosened up, your arms are loosened up, and your body's ready to roll. We're going to start off with just a real simple knee to chest stretch. Now, ideally, you would do this walking, but as I don't have a whole lot of space, we're just going to do this back and forth across the screen. You're going to stand up nice and tall on the left leg. We're going to lift the right knee up as high as you can on your own. Grip the knee with the hands. Pull the knee to the chest. Take a step forward. Now, it's important that as we're going through this, we're not sliding forward at the hips. We're not dipping back at the hips. We're staying real tall through the torso and pulling the knee up. Take a step, pull the knee up. Take a step, pull the knee up, take a step, pull the knee up. I would say ideally you want to hit about 8 to 12 of those depending on your flexibility. After that, we're just going to perform a series of squats. I'm sure you guys have all done a squat before. Set your feet up about hip width apart, dropping down, bang out 8. After that, we just want to hit a series of reverse lunges with a knee drive. Very basic reverse lunge. I'm going to step back with the right leg. And when I come up, I'm going to focus on punching that right knee up, much like you're going to on every sprint that we're about to perform. So take a step back, lower down, load up, drive that knee up. Back down. One more. Same thing on the other side. Punch up. All right. So After that, we're going to start to move into some simple sprint mechanic drills. We're going to start with a march. We're going to move from a march into a skip, and we're going to move from a skip into a run. Now, the purpose of these drills is to basically get your body used to the tempo, the rhythm, and the mechanics of the sprint. The march is going to start with just a real simple posture. Left leg, right arm, right leg, left arm. All right, by now your heart rate should be up a little bit. If you'll notice on that set, we're focusing on really punching through the opposite arm and the opposite knee, but also the toes themselves are pulled up towards the shins. We want to make sure that we've got a nice firm ankle on every stride so you can really punch the ground. Now the second drill that we're going to go through is more of a skip, where the idea is to get a little bit more rhythm into each stride. All right, so you'll notice that on each one of those strides, kind of what we talked about in the beginning of the video, kind of shown through a little bit. You can see the idea of a good hard knee punch up, getting that knee up above the hip. And then on every foot strike, you'll notice that the foot was coming down directly under or even slightly behind my center of mass. At no point does my foot strike the ground out in front of my torso. Right here, we're putting pressure straight down. Here, we're putting pressure back. And that's an important distinction. One of the biggest mistakes, one of the biggest technique flaws that I see in athletes that I train is oftentimes the foot will strike down in front of the torso, which actually slows you down on every single stride. Ideally, when you sprint, every time your foot hits the ground, it's going to continue propelling you forward. In order for that to work though, your foot has to hit the ground under your center of gravity or even slightly behind. If you're striking the ground in front of you, you're stopping yourself, right? So keep that in mind. It's important that we're striking the ground under the center of gravity or slightly behind. All right, now the next drill is more of a run. We're gonna get the knees up nice and high, and we wanna move at more of a running type pace. All right, so the warm-up's doing its job. My heart rate's slightly elevated. I'm slightly shortly out of breath. Now we want to start to work on some short distance sprint work. The first sprint is going to be called it's basically just a 3-stride sprint. Real short distance between cone A and cone B. It's probably about 3 yards in length. And the idea is to try to cover those 3 yards in as few strides as possible. The goal on this is not to overstride. You're not trying to take the biggest steps that you can. You want to think about pushing yourself as far forward on each stride as you can. All right, so I'm gonna get about 3 of these in, and I'm gonna give myself about 30 seconds of rest in between each one of these sprints. Again, the goal on these, it's really, really cold out here. That's why I'm so out of breath. Again, the goal on these is to try to get as much out of every stride as you can. Like, you're really trying to push yourself as far forward on every single stride as possible. All right, let's get another one. All right. Also, there's, it's early in the day right now. There's people walking around. So if there's a truck that drives by, you can't really hear me. There's someone walking by with a barking dog. You might not be able to hear me. Basically, the idea is all the same. I'm gonna give myself another 15 yards as I watch my cats fighting with each other in the window. All right, so that's gonna be it for those. Now we're gonna open it up to a slightly longer sprint. I'm just kind of estimating here, but I want these sprints to be about 10 yards in length. So I got the first cone set up where we're gonna start. And then we're gonna go to the second cone, or this third cone that I've set up right out here. I would say this is probably close to 10 yards. All right, so with these, same idea. I'm gonna start slightly different this time, however. So I've started with a crouch start on the first 3 sprints, and on this sprint right here, I'm gonna start with my feet together. I'm gonna kind of get up on the toes, and I'm gonna allow myself to fall towards the ground. As I'm falling, I'm gonna get a big hard knee punch of whichever leg I'm leading with, and I'm gonna take off into the sprint there. The goal of this sprint is to keep yourself nice and straight through your torso as you fall. Get a real aggressive knee punch up. Really focus on driving that knee up as high as you possibly can, and then punching back. All right. It's not all that pleasant running on concrete. Strongly advise you guys to run on grass if you can. So I'm gonna give myself, according to my stopwatch here, another 50 seconds, and then I'm gonna get another one. And again, it might seem like a waste of time to just be standing around. You might not feel all that tired. You might not feel all that fatigued. That's a good thing. Again, the goal of this is to get faster and faster as we go. You can't do that when you're fatigued and when you're tired. That's why sprint training is generally done immediately upon the start of a training session when your body is at its freshest. Again, outputs is the goal when it comes to speed training. We want to go faster and faster and faster. We don't want to be tired. I'm gonna give myself another 10 seconds. My cats are staring at me through the window right now, looking at me like I'm a nut. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so that one wasn't all that good. There was definitely a stride in there towards the end where I could feel whichever leg it was that was leading ended up striking down slightly in front of me, which kind of threw off my whole rhythm. Right, so sprinting, it's very rhythmic. It should feel loose. It should feel natural. It should feel like you're bouncing across the ground. It shouldn't feel clumsy. And the last couple strides of that last sprint for me felt clumsy. So on this next sprint, I'm going to try to improve that a little bit. I'm going to give myself another, 20 seconds. All right, that felt better. That felt a lot smoother. I know that my strides were a little bit better, and part of it was I wasn't trying as hard to run fast on that sprint. I kind of just let myself flow with the sprint, and a lot of times when that happens, you actually end up running faster than when you're trying to run faster. So that's another thing that you want to think about on these sprints. The goal is to feel nice and smooth. It shouldn't feel like you're forcing it or trying to rush it. I'm gonna give myself another. Again, I want you guys to make sure you're getting at least a minute of rest in. I'm talking and I'm trying to use the stopwatch that's on my phone to kind of gauge my rest period. So I might not be coming in exactly a minute, but ideally I want you guys to come in at a minute or more on each sprint. Give myself another 20 seconds, then I'm gonna get one more. All right, so next up, we're gonna keep the 10-yard distance, but now I'm gonna throw in 3 sprints where the goal is gonna be a 10-yard, we're gonna do a 10-yard sprint, and then we wanna throw in a quick deceleration to a complete stop. So these last couple of sprints, I've been going through the cone and then just gradually slowing myself down and stopping whenever. Because change of direction and because deceleration is so important for athletics, on these next 3 sprints, we want to go as fast as we can, cone to cone, and then as soon as you get to the other side of that cone, we want to drop your weight, drop your hips, and slam on the brakes. Bring yourself to a nice, slow deceleration. A couple key things to think about. If you're decelerating correctly, you're not going to feel any kind of knee or ankle pain. You're going to absorb all the impact with your hips. So I'm going to slightly slide this camera. Actually, I'm gonna start behind that far cone and I'm gonna finish right outside of this cone right there. You guys will see what I'm talking about. One, I'm gonna give myself a minute, come back and get another one. can also get an idea of the neighborhood that I live in. Don't stalk me. All right. Good right here. Cool. All right, so I'll sprint. I'll get through the cone that you can see, and then I'll come to a complete stop before I get to the end of that grass line right there. That was good. My cats are really into this. Say hi. I don't know if you can see them there or not. They generally find me boring, but when I'm outside running around, they're usually pretty entertained. So, yeah, camera set up. We'll get one more. All right, so there's a little acceleration, deceleration. All right, now we're gonna finish it up with some longer distance sprints. I'm gonna start right at the cone, right there. And I'm gonna take off. It's a little bit past the truck, right to the edge of the property line. There's a cone down there. I have no idea how far that is. I'm just going to assume it's 15 to 20 yards, but I could be totally wrong. All right, so my start on this, we're going to go back to a crouch start. The keys to a crouch start are, we want to make sure that we're dropping your hips down and we're kind of spring loading your hips. We're not bending at the waist. I'm not kind of throwing my back into it. The goal is to kind of load up the hips and the legs and kind of spring out of it. So I'm going to start with my feet about just split, whichever foot you want to have lead. You're going to drop down, loading up the hips, loading up the knees, and loading up the ankles down, and then quickly spring out into the sprint. We don't want to waste any time dropping down and holding that position. It's going to be sink, load up the hips, spring forward. By the way, if you guys have any questions about anything related to speed, agility, deceleration, change of direction, I'm sure there'll be a link in this video to where you can reach me, email me. You can even text me if you have my number. I'm losing my mind not training people right now, so anybody that wants to get in touch, please don't hesitate. I'm gonna give myself about 90 seconds of rest now between these longer distance sprints. I'm gonna get 2 more of these in. Same crouching start, drop down, spring out. Another thing that we want to think about is the position of the lead knee relative to the lead ankle. Ideally, we'd have your knee, the knee itself should be out in front of the toe. That's going to keep all your weight on the front of the foot. Your heel should be almost off. If your heel's not off the ground, it should be light enough to the ground that you could slide a piece of paper under your heel. We want to try to get all your weight going forward so you can push back against the ground. If your knee lines up directly above your ankle, when you go to drive, you're going to push down instead of pushing back. So again, to reiterate, the goal in every sprint is to push back, push back, push back. Okay, so knee out in front of the ankle. It's funny, I'm actually less out of breath now than I was after the warm-up. Just to give you an idea of how you should be feeling in between each sprint. You should go into your next sprint as fully recovered as you possibly can. I know it sounds redundant, but too often I see speed training videos and speed training drills turned into conditioning where you do a sprint, you rest 10 seconds, and then you do another sprint. That's not where it is. That's not where speed is. You gotta give yourself that rest. Gonna get one more. It would be nice if it could at least be sunny and warm out. Like if we have to be stuck at home, the least it could do is just give us 75 and sunny, right? All right. Here we go. All right, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. I'm gonna go have some breakfast. You guys enjoy your day. Again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions on some speed training workouts you can perform at home, or if you just want to talk a little bit about how to get faster. My name is Heisler, and thanks for watching.